Hey, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Hell yeah,
A wonderful art review show, or at least we try to be wonderful. It's highly disputed by our biggest fans. In order to learn and grow and consume art and try to really get as much as we can from that, whether it's movies, TV shows, music, video games.
Big time.
We try to learn and keep ourselves practicing as artists.
And ideally, you would be learning at the same pace that we are.
But really, this podcast is for us, and we just happen to put it out into the world.
Right.
It's the truth. It's the truth. I will not shy away from this truth. But nevertheless, before we get into the wonderful downloadable content expansion to one of our favorite games in our lifetimes, easily to say, Outer Wilds, the downloadable content is called Echoes of the Eye. Really fast, I gotta say, Mac, last episode on Barry Season 1, I corrected you on the pronunciation of a character. The character's name is Gene Cousineau. You said Gene Cousineau. Yep. I corrected you. However, a recent episode that literally came out, the last episode that came out before we recorded before we're recording right here, right now, the character of Gene Cousineau says, "Hello, I am Gene Cousineau." So we're going to need to defer to a third-party regulator, referee of sorts, in order to determine, how is this going to be officiated, right? Are we going to redact your 1 point in its entirety, even though it doesn't matter anymore because we are now on a new 10-episode streak where we'll be keeping track of the penalties? All right, but are we then going to give me 2 points because I corrected you on a thing that didn't exist? It's a whole thing we'll catch up on, but that was the thing we just needed to put into the air. Right. Now we can finally get into
hiring a mediator.
Hiring is a strong word.
We're employing.
That's also a strong word. We're asking.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a wonderful, wonderful DLC piece to a beautiful, one of the best games we have ever played.
Easy.
Echoes of the Eye is an expansion for the masterpiece Outer Wilds. Good. The original game has you explore the solar system, figure out what's going on, why is the sun going into supernova every 22 minutes, and you're in a time loop, and you are to figure out the secrets of this solar system that you live in. And I should leave it at that. Also, I don't think we said it enough when we reviewed Outer Wilds. If you haven't played Outer Wilds, period, stop listening to this right now.
Too many spoilers.
Stop listening to it. For everything else that we review, it's whatever. You should experience them first before you listen to us. But this is hardcore. You should seriously stop what you're doing because
this will ruin your experience.
This is potentially the best game you have ever played, and you just haven't played it yet. Yep. That's the thing. And because if you find out any information in regards to the secrets that this game has, you're doing yourself a disservice because the entire Outer Wilds game, mechanically, how it's structured, as well as Echoes of the Eye, it's DLC, how it's structured is that knowledge is the power that you gain. And so you can only ever play the game seriously, for real, once, unless you have dementia or amnesia in some capacity.
Right.
Unless you forget your entire experience of playing the game, you're never going to be able to play that video game again. Very few video games carve that lane.
Right.
Very, very few. Outer Worlds does it immaculately. Now, that's the case with the base game. The Echoes of the Eye DLC introduces this weird, actually mysterious ship that's all of a sudden in your solar system, and you had no idea about it. And essentially, you investigate the secrets that's in there, and you find out, spoilers, there was a whole freaking society that was just chilling there. This entire ring world that's been around for a very long time, and you find out before the Nomai were introduced into the solar system. So for a fact this is at least 250,000 years old. This ship, right? The Stranger, as it's called, the Stranger being in the solar system. So let's get into the introduction of the DLC, right? So let's say on the front end, you have already played Outer Wilds, the base game, right? You and I both have. We know what happens in its almost entirety, right? And so we boot up the game one more time after we have purchased the DLC, and it tells us, hey, there's a new exhibit in the museum. Cool.
Go check that out.
Exactly. Immediately, the game is like, hey, there's a new thing, and points you in the right direction, right? You go to the exhibit in the museum. You find out they put the satellite at the edge of the solar system in order to get a map, right? That map view that you have at your disposal, that's how they do it. It's through that satellite at the very edge of the solar system. And they showed that it's connected to like a radio tower on Timber Hearth. All right, cool. You go to the radio tower, the door is open this time, and then you find there's a recording in the center, and then there are images on the walls. And one of these images, there's just that mysterious figure at a certain angle of the satellite. All right, so you go to the satellite, you wait for it to arrive at the angle, it's 40 degrees, and then you see this black hole. Not a black hole, I can't say black hole because there are literal black holes in this game.
But it's like a black dot in the
middle
of the
void.
sun.
It's more like a void, right?
Yeah.
Where it's blocking out the sun, but it's like you can look past it and there are stars, right? You fly up to it.
It's almost as if there is a invisible planet that is now floating in front of the sun, and it's being caught at the right time.
Yes. Yeah. And then you kind of piece together, oh, like this isn't really in the traditional orbit of the solar system, right? Of all the other planets in the solar system. It's like out of the orbit. So like, could there like not a single Hearthian, bumped into it, right? And not a single Nomai bumped into it either. So I guess what I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
Is that, does this feel like a legitimate sort of introduction to this world for you as the player, right? And so does it feel like the stranger was actually always there, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, we can say without a doubt in our minds, like if you don't buy the DLC, the stranger is not there, right? If you fly into where the stranger should be, it's not going to be there.
Yeah, no.
But like hypothetically, does it feel earned? Does it feel like it makes sense? In terms of how the stranger was introduced and how nobody has noticed they've noticed, but they didn't really notice it correctly. But nobody has bumped into the stranger. Does it feel like it makes sense in terms of the immaculate world building that is Outer Wilds?
Yes, and here's why. Because it is using things that are already in the world. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Something that was so clever about the original,
the
Outer
base
Wilds
game?
base game. Thank you. Base game. The base game of Outer Wilds is that a lot of the answers were in front of you the entire time. You know what I mean? And a lot of the stuff that makes you that makes you go aha in the game is all stuff that you could have found at any point in time. And I think that they kept that feeling there because all of the ways that you find the stranger and a lot of the things that you do on the stranger kind of relate in some form or fashion to the base game, to the original.
In a way, yeah.
And so I think that, like, for instance, the way that you find the stranger is by using the radio tower that already existed and was a real thing in the original.
Yeah.
And even though the satellite probably wasn't, you knew that that there was some sort of like something out in the abyss, right? And,
right.
And so that I think that they used the rules of the world pretty effectively.
Yeah.
And something that I loved so much and why I was so ready to buy in almost immediately is the fact that, or I guess not immediately, but once you find out where the stranger came from and who these people are, who these, the people
Owl,
before the
elks,
Nimoy,
these alien beings,
is that I love the idea that no matter how far you go, and even if you've played the base game and you've gotten to like the origins and the meaning of the universe and all that stuff,
right,
there's still stuff that you don't know, and also it's still older than that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's cool.
It's
really cool
nice
to think of the introduction of the story, right? Where it actually fills out some of the story from the base game, which is not something that I was expecting, right? The thing that I was fearing going into it was how disconnected is this going to be, right? Because my favorite part about Outer Wilds, the base game, is how connected everything is, right? You find something on Giant's Deep, and it's connected to something on Dark Bramble. You find something on Brittle Hollow, and it's connected to something on the Ember Twin, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's all these things interplaying with one another because of like the solar system, and it feels really cool because it feels things that are really unrelated are actually much more related than you think it to be.
Sure.
And so, of course, what I was fearing was, okay, this is just going to feel really out of place, but actually how it serves in the overall narrative of the world that is Outer Wilds, right, is that you have these people who reached and found the Eye of the Universe's signal first. And they were more proactive, and they were the ones that went out to, like, in order to, seek salvation in some sort of way. It's kind of ambiguous purposefully in terms of, like, what they're trying to get from the Eye of the Universe, right? They find out, the Eye of the Universe, essentially, if you witness it, it causes the Big Bang, and then everybody's going to die. And, of course, they turn to fear. So then they use a device, essentially, to trap the Eye of the Universe's signal. Time passes, right? And then they make a simulation world of their home moon because they use the entirety of their home moon to create the spaceship in order to get to the Eye of the Universe. So you can imagine if the Eye of the Universe means their destruction, they feel a little bit betrayed and totally driven by fear at that point. There's one owl elk, right? That the inhabitant, whatever you want to call these alien beings, right, releases the signal, and because they release the signal, that signal reaches the Nomai. The Nomai enter the solar system, and everything that happens, as we know, happens. And what's really cool is also, if you go to the Eye of the Universe once you have bought the DLC, is that you can actually see where the jammer, as I'll call it, right, the jammer to prevent the Eye of the Universe's signal reaching out. You can see the jammer there, just right off into the space, right outside the planet. That is Eye of the Universe. It's a very, very cool thing. And so, like I said, I was very, very impressed by how it all kind of actually more so seamlessly fit in. That even though it's still a story set, in its own capacity, right, in its own container,
right,
and even though that there's not necessarily things that come from other planets in the solar system that you learn that apply to the Stranger, right? What you learn in the Stranger is only really applicable in the Stranger.
Right. Sure.
You can't apply it outside, and anything you learn outside, you can't really apply inside the Stranger. Even with that being said, it still finds a way to be involved in the overall narrative, which I found to be, A, very rewarding, and B, very impressive. Because I will say, Outer Wilds is a damn near perfect game.
The base.
The base game.
Sure.
Yeah, it is close to a perfect game.
Yeah.
There are a couple of puzzles here and there that I did not feel was the most clear, but aside from that, there has never been a video game that has made me feel that way. So, interesting segue. Did Echoes of the Eye
I was about to ask the same thing.
ever give you a similar, the same, or the more of the feeling of you were empowered by knowledge and you were empowered by discovery in order to reach out and learn new things and discover and do more things?
Yes, I would say so. I don't think that it was the same.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's necessarily bad. I think that if it was trying to be the same game, then it would have been included in the original game.
Yeah.
I think that there are definitely parts of The Stranger that I felt actually were better for me, or overall more effective, because it was a lot more puzzly in my mind than it was like it was a lot less quest and a lot more puzzle, if that makes sense.
I'm with you there.
And I think that's because a lot of the pieces of the puzzles were pretty consolidated. They were all right there for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
the entire thing is so contained, right?
Right. Which is by design, and I like that a lot.
It can't be as much exploration.
Right. And it felt kind of jigsaw puzzle-y in that no matter how frustrated you get because you don't feel like you're finding the right piece, you know the piece is on the table. You know the piece is somewhere there. Like they gave it to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't have to like wander around.
Yeah, you don't have to be
much.
like, okay, maybe there's something on this planet.
Yeah,
you know,
I guess I
like
just
you
haven't
know for a
looked at the
fact
right-
everything is on the stranger. You may
Yeah.
not know where, right? And that's where the exploration sort of seeps through. But
And
you're right about like it's so much
think
more
the
concentrated.
The perfect example of this is the fact that there are so many times in the base game where you are going on a like on a storyline, or you're on a world and pursuing something or some clue of something, and it's so frustrating and confusing that you just give up and have to go to another world to do something else, like you just said. And if there's any indicator of what this game is like, it is most clear, or of the DLC. It's most clear in that you abandon your ship whenever you go to the stranger, and you are not allowed a ship log anymore. And if you want a ship log, then you have to die, pretty much, or go all the way back. But
you have to like leave, you know, the ring world that's been created inside of there.
But
it's so cool.
But then whenever you go but then whenever you go to your ship log, it just tells you go right back in, like
essentially.
Right. So like there's really no point in leaving, and I will say the frustrating part about that is that I really, really wish that they had, like pretty early on in the game, given us a way to die and wake back up in the stranger. Because with the base game, you either died as a consequence, meaning like you like it's almost like a punishment that you have to go back. Or you get in your ship and you go somewhere different. But because no matter what, every single time I died, I would go back to the same place every single time and just have to like sit there that 5 minutes or whatever it took to wake up, to get on the ship, and to fly out to the stranger and to land and get in and everything. It was just like
you wanted like a little bit of expedited travel.
Yeah,
and I will say like
in that way, because the travel didn't add anything.
I understand. Okay. I'm with you there in terms of what you're. Yeah, I'm
No,
with you what you're trying to get back.
This is a
at.
nitpick.
Yeah,
this was not something that actually like really deterred my experience, or that I really thought about all that often.
But like in a mechanical point of view, right?
Yeah.
That like, regardless of how you died, it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not you rung up those 22 minutes or like you did die in the world, right? Yeah, there's that like, okay, like here are 2 minutes or so that you got to spend getting in your ship.
Right.
I would probably say like minute and a half, really. It's not that much time, but it's like.
But I will say though that
you feel it a lot more because you're going to the same place over and over again.
And the only reason that I'm nitpicking this hard is because this is a game that is so unbelievably detailed in every form and fashion that even the parts of the game where I'm like, that doesn't look as good as it could have looked, I'm like, no, that's actually a style choice. Like, they decided all of this very specifically, and I know they did. And like, for instance, this is, you know, a reckless speculation.
Whoa!
Get ready.
Okay.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the average amount of time that it takes for you to travel to a planet, which is fairly similar.
Depends on the planet.
Yeah, but most of the time, you can press autopilot and it just takes you to a place.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the times that it takes you to get from planet to planet is about the amount of time that it takes for you to check the social media on your phone. Does that make any sense?
Wow.
I know, reckless speculation, but I will say I would play really hardcore, would be like really zoned in, and then every time that I died, I would get really like tired and be like, oh gosh, okay, I need a break before I can get back into that.
It's like a cleansing period.
Autopilot. Yeah, I would get in the ship, engage autopilot, check my phone, and the moment that I was done checking each of my apps, I looked up and I was at the planet.
It's like having like 20 pounds of meat for dinner, right? An entire freaking pig.
Yeah.
And then the chef personally gives you like a little cup of sorbet to cleanse the palate.
Yeah, sure.
And then you're back at it.
Yeah.
And you eat the pig again. No, I understand.
You know what I mean?
I actually do. I understand what
I wouldn't be shocked.
What that this entire point, right? Yeah. The frustration of having to do that over and over again. And like I wouldn't design it differently, if that makes sense. right? I wouldn't do anything differently about it. I think
Yeah.
what they did is the right choice.
Sure.
And I think it's also allowed to be a frustrating sort of thing to like hurdle per se. That like you just have to keep doing it over and over again, right? You have to do that same.
As is life.
I mean, yeah.
You gotta keep doing it over and over again. Yeah. What? I guess as we're comparing, and I'm sure we're going to get into this a lot more later on.
Sure.
The thing that made the first one so unbelievably effective.
The base game.
The base game. Sorry, not the first one. The base game. Thank you. Was had a lot to do with how it related to us and how it was so personal.
Yeah.
And it touched on so many fears that all of us share as humans, but we so rarely talk about. So I'm wondering, were any of those feelings or any of those thoughts or any of those chords that were struck in the base game, did those ever come back up for you in this one?
Fear is the perfect word, right?
Yeah.
Fear is...
I'm glad they dove into that with this other race.
If there is like one word to describe the entirety of this expansion, and I think we're going to get into this very, very heavily, is the word fear. I would also like the word loneliness comes to mind as well. The fact of like
loneliness.
You're the only one that knows this exists.
Yes.
And it's another language,
true.
but this language you don't know. Like your translator pulls up and it doesn't translate it for you.
That's funny. I didn't really have a huge personal connection with each of the characters in the base game.
Yeah.
Was that something that struck you that you were like, I'm not seeing anybody? Did you ever feel like you wished that people were there?
Well, it didn't really occur to me once I went to the Stranger, right? Like, there was something about the base game where, like, okay, there were nomai civilizations.
Yeah.
There was another alien race that lived here. We have a translating tool, so we know what their life was like, what they loved, what their objective was, what they sought for. We know what that is, right? And then we also have, our own alien species, right, who has already figured out a bunch of stuff about the nomai as well. And plus, there are already other astronauts out there in the solar system, too. We are not alone, right? We are alone in terms of the knowledge that we unlock, but us in the solar system and necessarily, like, who we are in it doesn't feel lonely, right? I never felt lonely while playing the base game.
Yeah, same.
As opposed to when I
Stranger.
enter the Stranger, I'm like, I'm the only person that knows this is here, period, full stop.
Interesting.
Everybody here is dead. I am the only one that knows this exists. It feels a little bit different than the Eye of the Universe because, like, the nomai knew that the Eye of the Universe existed. They just couldn't reach it, right? As opposed to the Stranger, nobody knows the Stranger is there.
Was that something that you got the moment you entered? Or was that something that you, over time, were like, oh shit, I'm the only person that knows?
It's accumulation of a few things, right? Where it's just like you enter the Stranger, it's in a cloaking field, you go into the loading dock, and it's like it's dark as hell, and then there's some text there, you can't translate it, you enter another room, it's dark, and then your flashlight turns some things to open the door, and then it's a dark cabin again, and then you release the raft drops down into the river, into this ring world, and you're like, I'm the only person that knows this is here.
Sure.
That's it. And each time I go back, I'm like, I can't. It feels lonely in the sense of, like, even in this game, I can't share my experience, right? You can talk to one of the Hearthians, right, in Timberhearth and tell them, like, hey, I found a new language, and they're like, cool, give me like 600 pages of it, 6 months, a map of the, where they come from, the geography. Yeah, it's like another text option that is unlocked for you. And it's like, dang, like,
was that with the first guy that you interact next to the campfire, or was that just someone in the
it's someone else. It's someone in the museum. Not
funny.
Hornfels. It's somebody else. Hal, I think their name is. But all of that to say, it's super duper lonely. But then there's that, right? That plays a big factor into fear.
No, I will say, though, I had a very different experience with that.
Okay.
I was never quite lonely on the Stranger because it felt very lived in. That it was almost like I was expecting and kind of wanting to be lonely, but that no matter where I went, I always felt like I wasn't alone.
Did it ever feel like a ghost town to you?
Yes.
Because there's not a single body laying around. Not like the nomai, there are skeletons everywhere.
I felt like something was going to pop out at me 90% of the time on the stranger.
I want to comment on that specifically.
Because that ties into your fear that you were talking about.
Right.
I think that has something to do that it all relates.
Now, I want to say also, this is the worst thing that the entire game, and especially the DLC, did. The worst thing.
Interesting.
There are actually 2 screens after you buy the DLC when you start the game. There's a screen of new exhibit in the museum. There's a second screen of, hey, there's an option in the menus to reduce frights.
Oh, yes.
That is the worst
I agree.
thing.
I agree.
The absolute
Don't tell me.
worst thing.
Don't tell me.
That the entire game does.
Yep.
Because then what it does to you is, oh shit, is this going to be scary?
Yep.
And then the entire time you're playing the DLC, you're clenching to yourself because
Ready.
you're like, when is something going to happen? When is something going to happen?
it doesn't
When is
really.
something going to happen? Because the most that ever happens, right, is a little bit of a jump scare thing when, spoiler alert, when you enter the simulation, when you enter the dream world, and one of the owl elks sees you and grabs you, and it's like, ah, and like.
But it happens really slowly.
Really slowly, but then they're like, well, because can you imagine, like, you're chilling in this place for over 200-something thousand years, and then all of a sudden there's a person here that I have no idea who they are.
Right.
Like, can you imagine being them? Can you imagine an invader in your home?
Yeah.
How else are you supposed to feel? Like, how they respond, how I would gotta say, how that artificial intelligence, right, those NPCs, how they respond to you being there is like, glaring the lantern, focusing the light on you is like, what the hell is that? Oh my god. And then they like chase after you. Totally, it's wonderful.
Oh, I agree.
Absolutely beautiful.
I agree.
But that's the
But
thing.
it was not scary.
Not really.
Yeah, no.
Right? The scary thing for me was like, I'm in the dark, I don't know where they are, and I don't know where to go. And I just know there are walls here, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel claustrophobic, right? But I would not say that's necessarily... It never really got necessarily scarier than, like, the anglerfish on Dark Bramble.
Oh, way not as scary as that.
But because of the message, when you start the game, I was a lot more afraid the entire time I played the DLC.
But I'm wondering, is that better, or would you have liked to have gained that fear organically on your own?
I would have liked to gain that fear organically on my own, because the game on the front end didn't necessarily tell me how to act, but they gave me an expectation.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about Outer Wilds is having no expectations going into it and discovering everything for yourself. And that is a time in the game that the developer literally took that away from me.
Right.
And I hate that.
I feel like
I played the game differently because of that.
And this is true of all art. Right?
I gotta say really fast, and I'm not objecting to the accessibility option, right, of having reduced frights. I'm not objecting to that option at all. But just have it in the menu and don't tell me.
Yeah.
Maybe say it in like a manual or something, or say it like outside when you're buying the DLC. But don't tell me when I boot up the game that there's an option to reduce frights, because now I'm going to be shitting my pants the whole time when I should be having no expectations, and that's the best way to play Outer Wilds.
Right.
And when you're the developer, you got to know that.
But it's not only Outer Wilds. I think no matter what art you are making, I think this is true across all mediums, that the most effective in terms of garnering an emotional response from your audience is by setting them up for to not expect that. Yeah. I think that if I was to tell you this is a very sad play about the Holocaust or whatever, and we watched it, you probably would not have a huge emotional experience because you are setting yourself up for that. Yet if we're playing Outer Wilds and you're just playing some silly little game, and then at the very end it hits you very deep in fears and places that you do not want to really think about out of nowhere, that's way more effective.
Yeah.
Because it took you off guard and because it made you feel safe and comfortable, right?
Yep.
That's the best way to do it. Another question that this begs whenever we come back after a word from our sponsor.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Danny. So we are back for another segment. This is how I'd like to start us off. Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking at the very end of the last one about oh my god, I just blanked. What's wrong with me? this happens every time, Danny. This happens every single time. I swear to God. No, it happened with the fear. But like the worst part. Sorry, the worst part about
do you need notes?
The game. I know. The worst part about the game is the fact that it starts off with the fear warning, right? Yeah. And although I absolutely agree with you there, it does beg the question: what is the target audience here? Because I feel like a fear warning only really makes total sense to me if you're targeting it specifically towards kids, and I'm not sure what, you know what I mean? Like, are they making it a game that is accessible to literally any player? Because I don't really know if there is a cutoff age for this, in which case it would make sense that they would add a fear warning, because if you're young enough, you know?
I'm not opposed to the accessibility option.
Right. It's not that.
There is a wonderful sort of series of videos on YouTube by an individual who goes under the moniker, like the page is called Game Maker's Toolkit, and goes into detail throughout many series of videos, even throughout the years, of like games and their accessibility options, right? And like how do some games achieve these accessibility options? So like I just gotta say that I think it's really, really cool and really, really great that they do have that option of reducing the scaries. Even though you can turn up the gamma, right, on the computer version, I'm not sure for console versions, right, you can turn up a little bit of the gamma. It doesn't really remove...
Did you play computer?
I played it on the computer. We had this discussion last time because computer plays at 60 frames per second.
You're right.
And I did not want to play the game at 30 frames per second on console.
And let me tell you, it
felt like 30 frames per second?
It felt like 30.
You finally felt it?
I did. Last time I did not feel it. This time I definitely did. And I think it's because I had just recently replayed Red Dead 2.
Oh, and Red Dead 2 is at 60 frames?
The most beautiful game ever made.
Wow.
In terms of design. That's separate. Different conversation.
In terms of visual design?
Yeah, visual design, exactly.
Because I would say mechanically.
No.
It does not hold a freaking candle.
None of that. But I could sit there and ride that damn horse for hours just staring at the fucking landscapes. It's amazing.
But
anyways.
But all of that to say, I'm okay with the accessibility options, which there was more. Now, who's the target audience? I would still say it's people who played the base game, regardless of the age. But I would say like
right. But who's that?
Now here it ties into the achievement, let's say, of the DLC of Echoes of the Eye. That like it is legitimately scary. I was scared throughout the entire thing. I think it was enhanced because of the fright warning. But regardless of like how much darkness there is, darkness and light is used so freaking effectively.
True.
So effectively.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the fact of like it didn't feel like in reality, they didn't necessarily add too many things mechanically, right? That a lot of the new mechanics that were added were in the simulation world. Great touch, right? But how much the simulation world was covered in darkness, contrasting the ring world and how much light that has there, right?
Yeah.
It plays into the themes, right? It plays into the themes of like all the secrets are in the dark, right? What the truth is hidden in the dark,
right?
You know, it plays thematically there. It plays thematically of like because everything is in dark, you know, fear is taking over for the player, and that is kind of exactly what the aliens were going through.
Sure.
Is it not exactly, but like what the aliens were going through once they found out what the Eye of the Universe was all about. Everything they did after that was entirely driven by fear, you know? And so like I think it's an interesting question to ask of like who is that warning for? And I would say that warning is for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to, I wouldn't say it's for children, right? Because like I get scared pretty easily. I had a difficult time playing this game. It took me longer than hypothetically it should have to beat the DLC because of how scared I was. Because I had so much trepidation before even doing the simplest thing that I had to put the game down. I had to put the game down and walk away in order for me to calm down. I had to talk out loud and just talk to myself in order for me to calm down, right? It's stuff I had to rationalize. I'm like, okay, these owl elk creatures, they're afraid of me too. Like that, I had to rationalize to myself in order to calm myself down.
That makes me so happy.
Right? I would say that mourning is for everybody.
Right. Okay, sure. That makes sense. I understand that. However, do you think there's a cutoff age in terms of not necessarily scare or fear, but understanding of the overall message of the stories? You know what I mean? Like, if you were to sum up the base game, not necessarily the DLC, the base game, what the lesson learned by the very end, in that last moment around the campfire, spoiler alert, sorry, I guess, what would you say it was?
Like, life is beautiful regardless of what happens, and like we should always appreciate and try to find a way to accept life and the fact that like we will all die at one point, but like the universe keeps going, and that's beautiful.
Correct. Completely agreed. I think the way they made it, there's definitely a cutoff age in terms of there are definitely people out there, kids out there, that this would not land with at all.
Why do you say that? And I'm also interested why you're kind of like hung up on that, but let's dive into this a little bit.
I'm saying it because I think the thing that bothers me the most about the fear warning, right, or like the option and the fact that it tells you at the beginning, is because the only reason you'd really have that there, in my mind, is not because I don't think it's a horror game by any stretch of the imagination, especially in comparison to like some actual hardcore horror games. I think that the thing that is frustrating to me is you would really only put that there if it was a true horror game, which it is not, or if you were marketing this game towards kids. In which case, I think that there are some kids that would be scared by this.
I don't. Why are you hung up on this? Because I don't necessarily see the relevance of this point. Well, we don't have to.
No. It's just I found it very interesting because I don't. I just.
You're just
don't
trying to find the purpose of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I suppose.
Listen, what it probably was like the game was play tested, and probably a lot of the play testers was like, hey, that was scary as hell. Yeah. I wish all of a sudden this thing grabbed at me, and there's nothing really in the base game to like precede that, right? The closest is like the anglerfish all of a sudden turning at you, but I mean, you can see the anglerfish, right? And you see the light, and like once the anglerfish hears you and turns to get you, you can see the anglerfish, right? So, I mean, what it probably was playtesters being like, holy hell, could you not have let us know? You know, like what was... Sure. That was the scariest thing about the base game. That's probably what it was at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I still disagree with the decision. I can see how they arrived at the decision, but I still respectfully disagree with the decision.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I hear you. Understood. In your opinion, let's talk about the ending for just a second. Yeah.
The ending of the DLC?
The DLC. The alternate ending. Danny, how did it compare to the original base ending? And do you think that it was different enough for you to really get a different message and have any different experience? Like, did it hit you as hard as last time? Is what I'm trying to say.
It's never going to hit me as hard as the original. I still feel emotional when I, beat the and reach the base game ending. When I see the Eye of the Universe, I still get emotional because here's the thing. In the DLC, you find out this whole thing is connected. You find out there is a prisoner. You set the prisoner free, right? And you find out the prisoner is responsible for releasing the signal for a little bit, allowing the Nomai to get the signal from the Eye of the Universe, go to your solar system, X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Base game happens. And then when you go to the Eye of the Universe again, after you meet the prisoner, right? The prisoner is at the campfire, and you have the option whether or not to have the prisoner join you for like the final song, and essentially have the prisoner be a part of post Big Bang is how I interpreted it. Right? Or at least like some semblance, right? Some evolutionary line of the owl elk, right? Be post Big Bang. Did it hit me the same way? No, but I think what's really nice is, of course, mechanically, the game gives you the choice whether or not to allow the prisoner into the campfire. This is a way in order to still, when you have the DLC and have beaten the DLC, for you to choose between the original base game ending and the ending that includes the DLC. Mechanically, that's how that works. Now, with that being said, I think it's intuitively brought in a beautiful way, right? Where what it does is that it forces the player, it forces you to confront with the fact of, like, are you okay with this alien species, these owl elk creatures, right? Are you okay with the fact of, like, they were driven by fear and they became hostile essentially because of this fear.
Yeah.
And they almost bleeped up the entire universe for everybody else because they blocked the signal for the eye, right? Because you know that the universe is dying, and you know that all these solar systems around you, you look up into the night sky and you see supernova, 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 right? It's happening everywhere. The universe is dying.
Yeah.
And these creatures almost, like, had that be so. And maintain that because they were driven by fear. So it forces the player to kind of, like, recognize and have the thought of, like, how do we treat these individuals with kindness and with respect post, you know, if they have made mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big thing. It didn't hit the same way.
Uh-huh.
I'll say. What about you?
Do you think that the base game would have been clouded if finding the stranger and doing all of that in the stranger, and maybe if there was a way that they would have crafted the story to where you had to go to the stranger in order to get to the eye in the base game, do you think that would have clouded the original game?
That would not have messed up the story, I don't think, at all. The only thing that, like, I recommend doing the DLC after you beat the original base game is because, like, mechanically and gameplay-wise, the stranger is not very intuitive in how it connects to the rest of the solar system, that even though it connects well in terms of narrative and overall narrative and themes as well, it does not mesh well mechanically in the game because it lacks the interconnectivity with the rest of the planets when it comes to exploration. So to answer your question, I don't feel like if that was the case, if I experienced the ending for the first time with the owl elk there, with the prisoner there as well, I don't think that would have clouded anything. I think I would still feel the same exact way about the ending as I did the first time.
Yeah.
I would feel differently about how the gameplay of Outer Wilds is.
Sure.
Right? In terms of overall design.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's the difference of opinion.
Sure.
I mean, did you feel different about the
ending? It felt very much the same to me.
Yeah.
It didn't.
And why fix what ain't broke?
Right. Sure. Absolutely. And because it was so similar, that's kind of why I had the thought of, like, well, would I recommend to someone play the base game, and then whenever you get to a certain point, I have no idea where that would be, a certain point, stop, do the DLC, and then finish the game as originally intended? Like, would I tell someone to hold off on their experience of the original ending in order to experience the alternate ending? I don't think I would,
because once you figure out a way,
similar.
Because once you figure out, oh, you use the warp core from the Ash Twin project and go to the vessel, and that's how I get to the Eye of the Universe with the coordinates from the core of Giant Deep. Like, that's like, once you figure that out, like, you're gonna want to do that. Like, you can't.
There's no reason
you can't tell somebody not to do that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So.
In terms of gameplay, it's not intuitively, like, there, you know.
I think there's one thing that we can agree on. I think, which is this DLC. Sorry, the DLC specifically is definitely not made for its ending.
Correct. It's made for the experience of the stranger itself.
And because the stranger's a cool concept.
It's safe to say, like, the designers were like, okay, like, mechanically, we still feel like there's something there. There's something to pick at
and
more
I like that,
in terms of this game.
I like that they were talking about, you know, like they released the base game and they I would like to imagine that they're thinking about it, they're talking about it, and they're going, okay, well, I really like the way that we made our message about, life and the beauty of like the fact that we all die and like the fact that there's something after us and like the organic, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that they might have looked at that and said, we didn't really talk about how scary that shit is. And why didn't we? Because it totally is.
I will say I will recommend. I was listening to it partially before we started recording. There's a group called No Clip, and they do an interview podcast. It's on YouTube. It's available on YouTube with some of the developers, including the director, Alex Beecham. It's on YouTube, and it has to do with Echoes of the Eye and the development of Echoes of the Eye specifically, as opposed to like just a base game. I want to talk about really fast. When did you realize that in the submerged structure, it was a prison? And when did you realize there was a prisoner in there? Did you ever have that like realization of like, oh, there's somebody trapped in there? Or did you not have that realization until you entered the submerged structure and you found the prisoner and you were like, holy shit, there's somebody here?
I did not know there was going to be someone in there.
Was that spooky then when there was like another lantern in there and you walked up and then there was like...
I would say a little bit. I would say seeing the other lantern there, pretty immediately was like, there's someone in here. Yeah. Because and also it was lit. Yeah. So it's not like, like that wasn't like.
And how neat was it that it was somebody who didn't want to like kill you?
Right. Sure. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Because I'm so used to dying for a reason that I can't explain in that game. That's the most frustrating part for me.
Where all of a sudden the thing grabs you and then just breaks your neck and you're like, ah, shit.
Well, that or I reach my 22 minutes. That happens all the damn time. Where like I'm in the middle of something and I'm like having a really good time, and then all of a sudden like the little like the creeping in on from the sides of the screen, and then I'm dead, and I'm like, dude, I was in the middle of something. That happened all the time where I would go to like the hidden world or whatever, like the dream world. Yeah. And so often I would be in the middle of something, and
because it's so dark and you're moving around slowly and you're slowly igniting candles with your lantern.
I did love the way that they animated that, the way that they did whenever the reservoir would break, and how you would shake out of that.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. But the shock of seeing the prisoner, effective or no?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely didn't. Were you expecting to be
think
prisoner?
I got spoiled a little bit. I knew there was a prisoner, and that's essentially what I knew going into the DLC. And so I was able to figure out pretty quickly. I'm like, oh, that's probably where the prisoner is.
How'd you find that?
I don't remember.
Oh, just it saw somewhere.
I think I was doing some research on the base game after we had beaten it, and we're about to talk about it. And I accidentally spoiled myself a little bit on the DLC. But like that didn't spoil too much about like what the DLC was. I just knew there was a prisoner.
Then I'll make sure to put it in our description for this video to make sure that everyone else is spoiled as well.
Wow. But
make sure they have the same experience as you.
So perfect. Let's. So it was cool nonetheless to have that experience.
Absolutely.
Was it rewarding? Would you say, like in terms of like emotionally from storytelling? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I will say that it definitely wasn't like.
Was there a sense of like, oh shit, that's it? Because I had a little bit of that.
Yeah. And then there was because it was. And I think it comes down to this: all of the moments where you go A+ storytelling in the base game are moments where you learn something. Yeah. Whereas this was just like it just appeared in front of you, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I wish, and I feel like if they would have made a lot of the like, huge story moments, like these slam dunk moments, if they would have taken it back to information that you get or something that you're reading specifically. And I would love to touch on that because I think that might actually be my sizzle serve. Okay. Is that I think the best part of Outer Wilds.
Period? The entire thing, including DLC?
Including DLC, including base, including all of it. The best part of Outer Wilds are the parts that you read.
Okay. Because they dip a lot more into visual storytelling in the DLC.
That's true. And I think, though, that there is something about reading, because it is very stark to me, and I'm not sure how you feel about it because you are a much more seasoned gamer than I am. It kind of bugged me sometimes that there was no voice acting. Yep. That it was really just this soundtrack, and that the soundtrack was not like intense or didn't tell you how to feel. It was very basic for the most part. It was beautiful, and I loved the soundtrack. It's just that it wasn't spoon feeding you like an experience really.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the sound design, it felt like they made the specific decision to make that a backseat. And so it was difficult for me at times at first, because I was like, I really wish that there was at least some voice acting or sound effects or something that was a little more influential. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think what I realized eventually is that I had a much more drastic personal connection to the storyline because I had to read it. And because, like you were saying, especially...
You feel more connected to the Nomai because you're reading through their experience. Because
the
it's
whole
beautiful,
knowledge is
it's
power
beautiful
thing.
text, right?
Because the whole knowledge is power thing, it is not the character. Because if the character was reading something out loud, or you watched experiences like, if there's cutscenes or some shit like that, then I wouldn't feel as connected as whenever I am reading it. I, as the game, as the player, am learning it, not the character. Yeah. And that also goes for, I think, as well, at the very end, near the very end, whenever all of this, whenever all of the emotional parts hit, or whenever you're reading the character's dialogue instead of listening to the dialogue, because all of the it's almost like poetry, all of the connections that you're making and all of the aha moments, or all of the I get where you're going at, or like the it's hitting me like this is something that I can relate to, are connections that you're making in your head that are not being spoon fed to you, right? If you were hearing someone say something about how scary it is to die, but that it's something that's necessary and it's something that like we just have to be okay with, that would be one experience. But the fact that you are hearing it in your head and that it's almost as if it is a thought that you are having right now makes me cry more than hearing someone else say it.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the DLC, it was a good choice, though, to have it only be visual, that instead of you reading text, you're looking through slide reels.
Yeah.
Right? Have it entirely, for the most part, be
because there was a lot of
storytelling.
interpretation that went along with that.
Yes, and I think it also plays further into the disassociation, right? Into the loneliness of, like, because you can't read their thoughts because you're only seeing them.
Yeah, and because that unknown language thing with the lore, it made a lot. It was very cool, mysterious.
I think in terms of like as an art piece, in terms of presentation, I found it immaculately effective. Did I enjoy reading through Nomai text more? Yeah. I would say so. Yeah. There's a lot of text, I will say that, but like,
and that got to be annoying.
Sure. Especially when not all of that text is relevant.
I was about to
which
say the
is
same
totally
thing.
fair, because when you're building that world, like, you can't have all the text be relevant, because then you're like, this feels too convenient.
Right.
But on that same token, I think it was still the right choice though to have it be entirely visual storytelling, because then it's like it's stretching this other muscle essentially is what the game is doing. Wow, we are eclipsing into a time that I do not wish.
We're blazing through.
We may have to have a conversation about this. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. Mac, I'm suggesting we do a third part.
Oh, Danny.
So Mac, I'd say let's cut this off right now. All right, and let's do a third part and let's discuss, because we haven't gotten into the dream world, and I really want to talk about the gameplay mechanics
in the dream
of that. Like that's a thing that I think absolutely needs to be discussed.
Our allotted time is not appropriate. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Let's go.
There's simply too much to discuss here.
Third segment, here we come.
All right, listen, folks, we're doing a third segment because we felt the necessity to do so, because we didn't really hit all the marks that we wanted to hit, and we felt like there was still some discussion, at least to be made, when it comes to this DLC.
And who's stopping us, Danny?
Nobody. I mean, we should be stopping ourselves, because we've been recording a lot, and also, like, between the two segments, we just spent, like, 25 minutes looking at NFL logos.
Yeah, why did we?
It was great.
It was really awesome. It felt so good.
God, that's my wheelhouse, baby.
I'm hardcore campaigning for us to make a tier list of the NFL logos, because I think our insight on that is invaluable.
Maybe after our review of NFL Street, maybe we'll consider.
Oh, you know how I feel about NFL Street. We've played that against each other.
We have.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
the days.
Ooh, okay, but all that to say, we love video games. We love Outer Wilds. We love Echoes. of the eye.
The segue, okay.
I wanted to talk about, because we never really got to it, like the mechanical depth of the dream world, right? The simulation. Absolutely. You find out that the Owl Elks built this world because they tarnished their home moon, and once they found out the eye meant the end of their existence, they sobbed and they were incredibly homesick. So they made a simulation world, which is, like, in terms of story, it's like heart-wrenching but also beautiful in some senses of that. But like, what's really cool is that in order to travel to this dream world, you need this artifact. Let's just call it the artifact, right? Where it's like a torch sort of thing. You can use it to focus light into a distance like a flashlight. And what you do is, once you're holding this and you fall asleep, you doze off near the green campfire, right? Let's not forget the fact that there are no bodies at all throughout the entirety of the Stranger, except for the fact of these little green fires, and that's where the bodies are, and that's the skeletons, but the lights are on. And it's so cool because you find out, oh, they're alive in the simulation world. They're just not alive. They're not alive in reality, which is just so spooky. And then when you're traveling the dream world, right, like, you may hear, like, their footsteps right above you in one section. And another section, you see the shadow of one, like, looking at, like, slide reels, for example. In another one, you see them walking through the swamp as well, and they're chanting in this, like, in this house. It's really, really great how they sort of trickle in these this alien species from a distance, right, and trickle in their introduction to you before they just right onto you and break your neck or blow out the fire in the artifact, right? But what's really cool, and it's a heady play that I want to mention,
heady play,
is that it's a really brilliant idea, and they talk about it, I know for a fact, a little bit in the interview podcast that the developers do with NoClip, is that they were having a lot of trouble, like, introducing new mechanics into the real world, let's say, right? And they had a lot of issues doing that, but what really exploded for them was creating the simulation world, creating the dream world, and having that world have its own rules. Right. And so because the dream world had its own rules, they were able to branch out a lot more mechanically in really, really cool ways. And so you're able to focus on this, like, hand object, and when you focus the light on this hand object, you sort of, like, teleport to the hand object. Right. And because, like, it's a simulation world, if you place the artifact down and then you walk away too far, then you enter this sort of, like, datascape from, like, the original Tron movie is what it looks like. But then you find out secrets of the world as well, and that because of, like, these sort of oh god, it's so cool because there are 3 different sections to the dream world, essentially, right? 3 main sections, and you're supposed to get to the secret within each of those respective sections. And you're thinking that, okay, I'm trying to get the code in order to unlock the prison. But then what you find out is that all of those codes have been burned. But at the same time you figure out that the codes have been burned, you also find out through a different slide reel a glitch, right? A glitch that is possible throughout the dream world. You find out that you could fall throughout the loading zone in between areas, right? You could fall there. You find out about placing the artifact down and, like, going outside of that bubble and entering the datascape, and then you find out that if you die near the fire, the security alarm can't bring you back into the real world. So like those 3 mechanical things are really, really cool because it's, once again, it plays into the gameplay idea of knowledge is everything, right? It plays into the gameplay themes, rather, of knowledge is everything, and hypothetically, you could have done those things this entire time. But what enabled you to do these things is knowledge. Right. It is the power of that. So I guess I want to speak in a little bit was, I really want to ask the question too as well. Was there at any point during the playthrough that you needed a guide? Was there any? Yeah. Absolutely. What were those moments?
Sure. Not really. Definitely not the Dream World. The Dream World was very straightforward, and I thought it did a really good job of. Oh, do you not feel the same way?
The only time that I needed a guide for anything, and our buddy Sam, who had joined an episode with us for Brother Bear, I was like streaming myself to him, and he was watching me play. And
funny.
The only time I asked a question, because I was like, I don't want to keep banging my head against a wall, was in the swamp area. That in order for you to access the chanting house, you need the flood from the dam to happen, so all their fires would go out. So you need to access that area from a different area post flood, so you can enter the chanting house without being abducted.
I think I just did that by accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just happened to do that.
Yeah.
So I probably would have needed the same thing if I had dwelled too long. For instance, it took me a super, super, super long time to find the stranger in the first place, because the first time that I thought to go out to the satellite, it was too late. In that 22-minute stretch.
Oh, okay.
So I went up there and I waited for about 10, 15 minutes, and I was like, ugh. And then I died, and I was like, okay, well, I guess it's not there.
Did you miss the angle on the image in the radio tower?
Yeah,
okay.
Because the angle only comes around once per cycle.
Yeah.
And then you just have to wait for the satellite to go all the way around the solar system.
Yeah.
In order to see it again.
And it's only within a 20-degree sort of range.
And so I got up there just a second too late, and I had to wait the entire time, and it wasn't there, and I was like,
it was nauseating, I'm sure.
So that was difficult, because I was like, okay, well, I thought that it was there, but I guess it's not. But it did end up being there. I just didn't get there in time.
Yeah.
There were a lot of I texted you as well that a lot of the things that were difficult for me were timing things. Because and I mean same with the reservoir thing, right?
What were the time crunch elements? The fact of you need to do things before the dam broke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest thing for me.
What a great moment, though! When you see the dam break for the first time, brilliant moment.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh, it's so cool. Well, yeah, I mean, yes. You just well, the problem for me was that I was watching one of the slide reels the first time it broke for me. I had just happened my way into one of the first houses, and it happened to have a slide reel, and I had kind of figured that out, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I just see water on the floor, and it just starts rising, and then I walk outside, and there's just a fucking river all the way down, and I'm super confused. But the second time around, I show up there, and I'm like, okay, so it wasn't like that the whole time. I'm not crazy. And I look around for a second, and I happen to be outside.
Yeah.
I was actually on the bridge in between houses.
Oh wow.
The second time.
Yeah.
And so I see it, and it was beautiful. I see it.
It's such
and
a
then
sight.
It sweeps me away, and I hit something immediately and die and have to go back.
It's amazing how
beautiful.
Destruction can be so beautiful.
It was beautiful destruction.
Because the first time it happened for me was when I walked out of a house, and then I was just coincidentally looking at it, and it just broke, and I was chills went down my spine.
Right.
And I was like,
right.
But I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
A cool thing, I don't know if you know this, is that if you shoot your scout onto it, much like in Brittle Hollow, it reads the surface integrity. It also does that for the dam as well. So of course I did these great trick shots where I'm super duper far away, but I have the right angle perfectly,
and
then I shoot the scout, and it lands right on top, and I'm like, hell yeah!
That was so
good.
Sick. That's
so
sick.
Good.
Yeah. I would say another one for me that was really tricky that I really got hung up on was it was really difficult for me to find there were some caves here and there that I mentioned that were difficult to find for me because they they weren't super obvious, and it looked like shadows more than it looked like
in
a
the
cave.
real in the Stranger or in the simulation.
In the Stranger.
Okay.
And again, the simulation wasn't too bad, but also.
And you used the guide for that.
I would have liked a guide for that. I eventually figured it out.
Oh, okay. So did you never use a guide period?
I only used a guide to help. I only used a guide for funny enough for Dark Bramble.
Okay.
Whenever I was
period.
going back through.
Oh, when you were going back through getting the main game and
because I was like, I've already played this before. I don't need to review this again. I'm fine. Not doing this. And
you're not gonna spoil yourself.
I simply do not remember how to do all this shit because it's so tedious. Yeah, I fucking hated that the first time, but it was all for a reason, and you know, it was
it's part of the
there's a point-
experience and
right,
part of the
I get
tension
that.
of you have the twin. I mean, yeah,
That
you
doesn't
have
stop
the
it from being
core.
very annoying.
That's fair.
The yeah, and I guess the last thing that I would really like to touch on, Danny, is the puzzles. What were your favorite puzzles from The Stranger from the DLC?
Oh gosh, that is
A big question, I know.
That's
I
a
know,
big
I know.
question.
Or were there any puzzles that stood out to you as being specifically difficult, even?
It's not really. I mean, I want to hear yours because I'm having
Sure.
trouble thinking
me,
of specific puzzles. at the
Finding
present
all
moment.
of the combinations and like the pictures and the order of things,
Yeah.
that was a bitch. That
Yeah.
was really difficult for me.
Mhm.
I had to, because at first I just like tried to remember stuff, and then I was like, I'm not the guy for this, and so I had to like just die and go back to places and like take pictures of things. I
see,
had
yeah.
to take a lot of pictures.
Yeah, I
of-
think I took some pictures as well.
Yeah, and I didn't at first, and that was dumb. I should have taken pictures, as well as I should have taken notes overall.
Yeah.
There was a lot of like,
Because
you get a piece of
the ship
information, you have
log
to go-
doesn't track as much as I would
Right.
say it did in the base game. Like
It-
I found the ship log to be very reliable in the
in
base,
the base game. But because you leave your ship behind here, you can't go and revisit it that often.
Yeah, only at the
Only
the
whenever you
start
die.
of every loop.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would say it was rewarding when it was mostly like, can I do that? Right? Like in there's. Sorry, I'm just really
No, you're
poor
fine. You're fine.
with words.
No,
But I would say probably
it's
the
a big
most
question.
enriching is when when I had all the knowledge, right? When I had the knowledge of all the glitches, and then I was like opening the prison lock, right? Like that was like super cool. Or rather, you know what was great for me is that when I figured out the glitch, and I'm not using glitch in the literal sense. I mean glitch in the simulation world.
Yeah.
The glitch of leaving the artifact behind enough, and then you're in the datascape. I use that in order to sort of map my way through some of the dark areas because,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit afraid of the dark, right?
Sure.
I think just like naturally and like deeply since like I was a kid, and that's mostly been rubbed away. But like it came up here,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But then I would leave the artifact
awesome.
and enter the datascape, and so I would path my way, and then I would be able to more easily see the inhabitants as well. And I'm like, okay, there's one here. Okay, so I need to bait them this way so I can outmaneuver them this other way. Okay, so it's like this, like it
Right.
helped me do that. So I would say that was probably a really rewarding experience for me. That like the game allowed me to have that experience.
Yeah.
I think is the core of it. I gotta say also, before we start really wrapping this up, is that I hit the mic? Okay, that's a penalty.
That's okay.
No, it's fine. It's a penalty. I did hit it. It's a fact. Did you hit it as well?
Earlier, I did it down here on the base. Does that still
Oh man,
count?
but no, I did a good old slap.
Was that just like a psh?
Yeah, dude, it was. It
If
was
it
a
show,
slap.
if it shows up in audio, then that's it.
Fair enough. Now
We'll see. We'll review.
what I've been enjoying, because you can't play this game again for the first time. So screw you, Mobius Digital. I hate you for making a game you can only play once.
Yeah.
How dare you? Monsters! I love this game, and you can't allow me to enjoy it again. How dare you? But what I have found,
Unmitigated gall.
what I have found to be really enjoyable, actually, because I can't experience this again. But what I can do is watch other people experience this game. Maybe this is a sizzle serve. This is the best game ever to watch other people play. After you have already beaten it, of course, because it's the secondhand experience of like watching somebody else make discoveries, and even watch somebody else learn the wrong lessons or like miss things that
Do you
they
just
shouldn't
find
have
random
missed.
people on YouTube, or
So
are you showing
one that I've been
people?
watching recently, and he's also a great video essayist, is a guy named Joseph Anderson, and he plays a lot of other games as well, and have done a lot of reviews on other games as well. And he's immaculate as a YouTuber, and even though he doesn't upload often, the videos that he uploads are very long, but very substantial and very good. Somebody edited together his playthrough of Outer Wilds, so I have watched that in its
Interesting.
entirety, and probably soon after this, I'll be watching his Echoes of the Eye playthrough. And
How
I'll
long
probably
was that?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you.
That's fine.
But I mean, what's fun watching him? It's how much time he devoted to just trying to land on the sun station. It's like stuff like that. So like each player has their own experience, but like in terms of the discoveries, it's still really cool to watch. It's one of those things, as we are saying goodbye to Outer Wilds, like there has never been something ever in terms of art ever that has given me this experience, and I could not be more than thankful. If you are listening to this and you still haven't played this game, legitimately shame on you. But with that being said, like, thank you to Mobius Digital. Thank you for Annapurna Interactive for publishing, and thank you for Alex Beecham for directing it, and thank you for everybody else involved with this project and product, because it's like, it may not be my favorite game of all time, but it's definitely in the conversation of the best game I have ever played.
It is one of the most artistically fulfilling things I can think of.
Period. Full stop.
Absolutely. I will say the only thing that might rival it for me is another game that we experienced together, which is Journey. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. Mac and I did play Journey together.
I still think about that all the time.
Wow. Okay.
Truly, because it like the fact that they were able to give me that much and take me on that emotional of an experience with
on a journey,
no words on a journey with no words, and honestly very little story. But I was so attached. It was one night. It was just so weird. That was I've never experienced anything like that. I think if I went back, it wouldn't hit me as hard. It was kind of like I was talking about earlier in this episode, that it was just out of nowhere. I was so caught off guard that I was like, what just happened? Outer Wilds to do the same thing, though. It absolutely was a shock. It was how you found this, I'm still not even completely sure, but I'm very glad that you did, because it was definitely a diamond in the rough in a way, and that like it was just very randomly spectacular. And it really dug up some things in me that I as an artist always have wanted to talk about, and I've always found a lot more interesting than a lot of the stuff that I see nowadays, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like most stuff that we make nowadays can't be as poignant as this, because it always gets so trapped in the world in which it's being made, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you were able Outer Wilds was able to take us so far away from our world and simultaneously bring us so much closer to our world than any art that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and it challenges, at least for me, to think about, like, okay, like that knowledge is power idea, right? It's the knowledge that unlocks things. It's not the literal keys. Like, what we learn, those are the keys. Like, how can I apply that to other things? And I have no idea. Maybe it's something that can only be done in video games, but like, still, I've never thought of a game like that.
Yeah.
And kudos to them for having a downloadable content that feels like it truly has a place in the world that they created. Mm-hmm. That even though, like, there are some, I mean, we're talking nitpicks, right? Yeah. Nitpick issues that we have, like, it's still enhanced and added to the base game, which is a very difficult task. But once again, kudos to them. It's just spectacular, and it's as close to perfect as possible.
I love that review. Danny, what we are reviewing next week is, it's pretty clear. It's Barry Season 2.
Barry Season 2.
It has to be Barry Season 2. Easy as
that.
Barry Season 2, here we come! Woo!